Welcome back, everybody, to the FloTrack podcast. I'm Kevin Sully, joined by Lincoln Shrike, and the topic of today's show is Clemson cutting their men's track and cross country programs. And here to discuss are two folks: one, Ryan Fenton, Clemson alum, and our coworker here at Flo, and Russell Dinkins, who's worked with a lot of NCAA programs over the past couple months, who have seen programs get dropped. Let's get right into it. Start first, Ryan, with you. What was your first reaction? Did you see this move coming at all?
No, I did not. It was very sudden. I got a text yesterday. I forget who the first to text me was, but it was actually, I think it was Joe Battaglia at Flo. Said, "Hey, did you see this?" It was a PDF of the athletic director's letter to the community about the decision to cut men's track and field and cross country. And that was the first that I had seen of it. So very quickly from there, messages started flooding in, as I'm sure it did for, a lot of the alumni and for, I assume this is how it works for all the people that deal with this at all programs. The word starts spreading, people start messaging, everyone's kind of asking what's going on. Did anyone know about this? Where did this come from? And for us at Clemson, when I was at Clemson, we were not number one in the country in football. We were maybe a top 25 team. So you maybe in those circumstances are thinking more at risk in that situation. But when you're the number one or number two team in the country over the last 5 or 6 years, I'd be honest, it's not a concern that I've had. Watching all these programs starting to have financial issues. Clemson was not on my list of schools to be dealing with this, especially being a Power 5 school and the best Power 5 school in football right now.
Mm-hmm. And we saw the release that the university put out, and we're used to reading those now because in this current situation that we're in, it seems about every month or so a program is getting dropped. But you had an opportunity to listen to what the athletic director said last night in a conference call. Any new information come from that, or is it pretty boilerplate at this point?
Yeah, I think it's more what you said there at the end. I think it's a more boilerplate than anything. I think there's the initial statement. The Zoom meeting that they put together for the media yesterday was all of 18 minutes. The first 4 or 5 minutes was literally a recount of the letter that went out publicly. So there wasn't a lot of new information. Any questions of it felt like any questions that may have had some depth or kind of some just asking of some further information on things that were said. That's kind of when it felt like the interview or the Q&A, whatever you wanted to call it, was kind of, that's when things kind of came to an end and said, hey, 1 or 2 more questions. And 18 minutes into the Zoom call, that was it. That was all the time that was afforded to everybody. So,
Russell, I want to get the response from your end. I know you didn't go to Clemson, but you also didn't go to Brown, and you were integral in that process and helping organize. And that process with Brown that brought back the program was lauded. There was an article in the New York Times about how well organized it was, but it also mentioned how well connected, how well financially it was connected. Do you see parallels to the Brown case and the Clemson case? And I know it's only been 24 hours or so, but do you see basically a similar roadmap that could bring back this program ultimately?
Yes, I do see similarities in the way that we worked with Brown. I think the closest model that can be used for Clemson could be the model that the University of Minnesota used that I helped them with. Now, University of Minnesota, they did not get their entire team back, but they did get their outdoor team reinstated, and some of the same arguments that were used to help them and some of the same strategies that was used to help them, I feel like can be applied to even greater effect with Clemson, given the racial makeup of the team and given that it's not necessarily a financial issue in the same way, in my view, as it was a financial issue at the University of Minnesota, even though the financial argument was specious to me. at the University of Minnesota, at least they could, in theory, lean on the fact that the Big Ten canceled football for part of the season, and so the school wasn't able to make as much money as they were anticipating. It still isn't a really strong argument in my view, but that argument isn't something that Clemson can really lean on. And so I do think that we have a model that we can use to help save Clemson's team. It was really interesting. I got the news that Clemson cut their team literally 30 minutes after I heard that William and Mary reinstated their team, and I had helped them reinstate their team. So it was kind of like, yay! And then got a text message, Clemson cut their team. And then yesterday was ridiculous. My phone was blowing up. So I was like, okay, guys, let me figure out things. But it is really humbling, and I'm very flattered that people have been seeking me out for helping in this regard, given that I've have found myself helping a few of the programs over the past several months.
To your eyes, and I know these press releases are given, the reasons are given. It's they're at least now they're being a little bit more upfront and saying it's not all based on COVID. This has been a long time coming, but cutting through maybe some of the jargon. What is the reason that track and field on the men's side is targeted? Is it first and foremost the numbers? Is it first and foremost the fact that it's a non-revenue? Is it all of the above? What is it? Is why this keeps happening?
I think there's a mixture of reasons. All of them amount to kind of the priorities that the university and their athletic departments place and where they place them. But you have two kind of issues that are kind of at play. You have the financial issues, and you also have the Title IX issues. And so what I mean by that is a lot of schools are having difficulty with the fact that female enrollment is increasing, and they have to keep their Title IX numbers within a certain ratio. And so at a lot of schools, they have greater female enrollment. Sometimes they have more female students than male students. And so in order to keep the ratios within a certain ratio, for lack of a better term, they have to perhaps reduce men's opportunities or add women's opportunities. So instead of adding women's opportunities, a lot of these schools are looking at, okay, how can we reduce male rosters so that we stay within the ratio that we need to stay within? And the easiest sport to do that with, in their eyes, is track and field, because track and field also is a large sport that oftentimes doesn't make a great deal of money, and sometimes does incur a large cost. My argument is that there are a lot of other sports that are just as expensive as track and field, and they are, they lose just as much money as track and field. In track and field, you're supporting athletes through 3 seasons of play. Sorry, forgive me, instead of just 1 season of play. And so, if you break it down, like for instance, at the University of Minnesota, it worked out to being about $6,000 to support each track and field athlete across 3 seasons of play, whereas their baseball team, which lost just as much money in the 2019-2020 school year, they end up spending about $130,000 per baseball athlete, and yet track and field was the sport that was cut due to fiduciary reasons. And so that is the issue. And then also going back to the Title IX issue, track and field athletes count for 2.5 athletes essentially. And so you have the same athlete, they run cross country, indoor and outdoor track. That's 3 sports opportunities. So if you cut track and field and cross country, you get 120 or something of that nature opportunities off the table. And so that can really help with the female ratio. So there are a lot of issues at play here, and it's just an easy way for an athletic department to kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone. But what they're not looking at is the deeper implications, rather, of their decision. And so, there are racial implications, there are socioeconomic implications, and there are also opportunities that are being denied from athletes. And ultimately, what they're doing is they're pitting female athlete opportunities against male athlete opportunities, which is wrong. The whole nature of Title IX is to provide more opportunity for students, for a demographic that historically hasn't had that opportunity. And what they're doing is they're using that in a really kind of pernicious way, in my view, to withhold opportunity from another demographic, which I think is just very wrong.
Ryan, I know in that conference call you asked the athletic director about the fundraising option because that's been the common response here, be it UConn, be it William and Mary, or all these other programs. And he responded that the operating costs were about $2 million, but then he said you put it in an endowment calculator and it's more like $60 million. Do you have any clarity on those figures, how all that works? Are they just calculating the cost of the program, or is it more in we need to not just fundraise for this program, but then we need to offset because then we need to fund for another women's program? Like, where are those numbers actually coming from?
It's not super clear. I mean, and I think you heard the answer that was given, and you kind of recapped it there. That was essentially what was said. There wasn't a lot of depth offered in, and what was given there, and how they got to that 60 million number, and what that actually means. So I think it still raises a lot of questions on what does 60 million mean, and if 60 million is actually the number. I think one of the things that rubbed alumni the wrong way is just how defiant the athletic director tried to be in his letter, saying this decision is final. And I think Russell's probably dealt with this. I mean, I think everyone's kind of said this is a final decision. And we've seen, and this was part of my question I asked to the athletic director yesterday, why do you feel like your decision is so final when we've seen this actually go the other way on a number of other programs? And that's where it just doesn't make a lot of sense. And personally, it's a little offensive for someone to come out and just be like, hey, there's nothing you can do about it. Right. Because if it's really a money thing and you're saying it's 60 million, hypothetically, if someone said, hey, well, I have 60 million, I'm a track and field donor, I'm a billionaire, and you know what, I want to save this program. Again, do I think that's going to happen? No, I'm not saying that. But hypothetically, you're telling us that your decision's final. You're not going to extend that relationship and actually save that program if someone comes up with that money. I find that hard to believe.
Mm-hmm. Russell,
and again, it's not about the money thing. It's about just the fact that that's the messaging you're trying to put out there.
Yeah. Russell, are you seeing that with the other schools that you've been working with, where they take a firm position, and then not only do you need to convince them that their position is incorrect, but you need to convince them to go back on their press release that they just put out a month or a week ago?
Oh yeah, all of them said that. And some different version of this is a final decision. There's no way that it could be reversed, and they've been reversed. So, you just don't take no for an answer. Essentially, yeah. I mean, I think Brown released a bunch of statements before they eventually folded. Same with William and Mary. William and Mary, actually, their situation was interesting because they cut a number of sports. They actually reinstated all of them. And so all of the sports were really, really pressing, and eventually got them to overturn all the decisions, which was really great. And with the University of Minnesota, what they did was really kind of sly, in my view. I wrote an article that got published in Star Tribune that explicitly called them out for effectively being functionally racist in what they were doing. By cutting track and field and gymnastics, they were cutting 85% of their non-revenue producing black athletes. Black male athletes rather. And while only cutting about 45 or something percent of their non-revenue producing white athletes or non-black athletes. So essentially the only black athletes that would be left on that campus were the ones who were making money for them, i.e. football and basketball. Black male athletes, rather. And so I found that to be extremely problematic, especially given that the money that was going to be generated from football and basketball often are used to support non-revenue sports that are oftentimes pretty white and pretty affluent. So, baseball, for instance, I mentioned it. Baseball isn't a sport that typically has a lot of students who are from lower income or first generation backgrounds. And most sports actually in college cater to more affluent communities. And so in effect, what you have is the football and basketball programs subsidizing, these opportunities, these sporting opportunities that result in admission spots for, middle class or upper middle class, white families who are using their sports as a way of gaining entry into the university. And so I felt that to be extremely problematic. I wrote an article about it. I watched the Board of Regents decision or meeting that happened 2 days later, and they mentioned a lot of the arguments that I presented in the article. So it's clear that the article made some traction, and they realized that they couldn't fully cut track and field because it would just look too terrible. So what they did was a half measure and saved outdoor track. The reason why it was so ridiculous, the new proposal was presented by the AD to the Board of Regents at 9 a.m. that morning. So they received a new proposal in their email that saved outdoor track with no prior information about that new proposal. And the Board of Regents voted to approve that new proposal at 2 p.m. later that day. I don't know much about boards, but that seems like a really weird thing to receive a radically changed proposal and to vote on it at 9 and vote on it, about 5 hours later when you received it in your email with no explanation as to how the outdoor team was going to be able to be added back in if Title IX and the money was such a big issue. Also, in terms of proper governance, that doesn't seem like something that a board should do, should vote on a radically changed proposal without proper time to assess. And I watched the meeting. They even voted on giving themselves extra time to assess the new proposal, and they voted it down. They just wanted to push it through. So it seemed like it was a face-saving measure so that the university could basically kind of skirt around some of the really problematic implications of their decision. And for a lot of people, they don't know that track and field in college can't function without indoor track. If you just have an outdoor track team, you're effectively, and there's nothing wrong with it, but you're effectively going to just have a distance team. You're not going to have throwers, sprinters, jumpers, and in Minnesota, it's cold until June, so no one is going to be going there, to participate in just outdoor track when they might have 2 outdoor meets at home. And so it really weakens the program to the point of possibly being cut in the future. And so there's still a fight there that needs to continue, but at least we were able to get the university on record, and the meeting is on YouTube, of them stating that, okay, track and field represents a diversity opportunity because it is the cheapest sport in high school, and it is a sport that literally is one of the most diverse sports in college, and particularly with Black participation. Black athletes are really only in 3 sports at a high degree in college: football, basketball, and track. And so if you cut track, you're literally cutting out most of the Black athletes who are within an athletic program. It's just what it is. People might be uncomfortable by that, but it's the facts. And so, and when you take the aggregate numbers, I averaged 8 years of NCAA data for Black male participation. About 13,000 Black athletes play football. About 3,000 Black athletes, 3,100 Black athletes play basketball, and about 2,900 run track. So, and then after that, it's 500. So I think after that, soccer is number 4, and it's like 560, 8-year average for a D1 participation. So it literally falls off a cliff. And then there's like 3 sports that are in the 500s, and then it goes down to like the 100s, like soccer, not soccer, hockey, hockey, lacrosse. These sports are in the double digits, like like 70. So it's very low in all these other sports. And so when you're cutting track and field, you're literally cutting out a really big diversity opportunity in terms of what's offered for a university's athletic department.
And I want to add one thing to that, because I think there could be a thought out there of it's not there's an opportunity at that university that's lost, but these kids can go somewhere else, right? They still have an opportunity to compete. But we also have to remember that when a program gets cut and men's track and field has 12.6 scholarships, those scholarships are gone forever. Those aren't going to other sports at the school. They're not going to other track and field universities where, you can get that opportunity at another school. That opportunity is literally gone. That money does not exist anymore. And so I know at Clemson, nearly 100% of the scholarship go to the African-American athletes on that team, right? So those scholarships are no longer available anywhere.
Yeah, that's a good thought. So you're saying, obviously if you went to transfer to another program, well, most programs are probably full on scholarship. So even if you're a really talented athlete, there's a pretty good chance you're not going to be able to secure a scholarship, particularly now.
Yeah. Or if you do, then you're bumping somebody else, right?
Yeah.
Like someone's going to get affected.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the number's finite, right? There are a certain number of D1 programs that sponsor track and field via scholarships, whether they're fully supported or partially supported. And so when you take away a D1 program, those are 12.6 fewer opportunities, and this is compounding, right? So we have this program and then other programs that have been cut, and so these finite resources in terms of spots are not being replaced. So it's really easy to say, okay, this some kid can go somewhere else, but in actuality, no, that kid may not actually be able to go to somewhere else. And it's not just that kid; it's that kid right now, and the kid that comes after that kid, and the kid that comes after that kid, right? And so, and then we also have to keep in mind that sometimes, some really talented athletes aren't necessarily on the national radar, but they may be on the radar of a coach at Clemson or a coach at the University of Minnesota or a coach, William and Mary, around the Williamsburg area. And so, that kid may not actually think about, that kid may not go to invitationals or go to, large meets like New Balance or what have you. And so, if they're not recruited by that school or that opportunity no longer exists, they may not ever have the opportunity to go to college in that way. I'm not saying that sports is the only way kids can go to college, no, but it does provide a pathway. And so my view is that these pathways should not be taken away, especially when they benefit a demographic that is not able to access the other sporting opportunities. Because let's be frank, a poor kid from a rural area or from an inner city is not playing an affluent sport. Yeah, you might have one or two, but in aggregate, that doesn't happen. But a poor kid from wherever can run really fast or jump really far. And we know how people get recruited in track. It just gets uploaded. And the coach can see it. You don't have to go to an expensive sports camp. These other sports, you have to go to a sports camp. You have to go to a tournament. You have to be a part of a travel team. All that costs money. So there's literally a financial barrier to entry that doesn't exist in a large part for track and field, which is one of the beautiful things about our sport. It is egalitarian in that way. And so we need to really communicate that value and really hold these universities' feet to the fire, because they all have statements about how they value diversity, how they value educational access and all that stuff. It really just seems like it's just horsewash, if they're not willing to back up those stated values with action.
Ryan, we've seen a strong response from alums of all different schools as this has happened. And now you've, for the last day, had this experience of seeing a program you used to run for be on the chopping block here. Can you speak to just what it feels like? Like, what does it make you think of, and what emotions do you feel when a program that you ran at for 4 years is on the verge of not existing anymore?
It makes me feel, I don't know if you know that Chris Farley skit when he gets the coffee and he's lied to, and this whole scene, and they say, "How do you feel?" and he just says, "Angry," right? I don't know if you guys are all familiar. Anyway, that's the first word that comes to mind. But I think it's you are angry, you're frustrated, you're confused, you don't feel like you're getting a straightforward answer. I think that's a lot of the discussion in text threads and Facebook message groups and all these things that are going on is, there's so many thoughts and questions, and it just points to the fact that no one really feels that they're being given the clear understanding of why the decisions have been made. And so I think that's the toughest part of it. And, I think in terms of just the response from the folks that we've talked to, I think everyone feels that. And I guess if you look on one side, there's this frustration, but on the other side, an unfortunate circumstance creates actually some positivity, and it's in a lot of ways brought a lot of people together that haven't connected in years. And to see not just friendships get reconnected, but the passion that you all had when you were at the university together, fighting for a conference championship, now kind of reignite in a different way. It's uplifting. We had a Zoom call with nearly 50 people last night of past alum, both men and women, past coaches from the program who now, some of which coach at other programs, and then current athletes there. And it was, again, frustration, but uplifting. There was points where it was emotional. We had our coach, when the late Bob Pollock, who was there when I was there and won so many titles, ACC titles, while at Clemson. His family was on the call, so it just brought so many people together. And so in this kind of cloud of frustration and confusion, you also felt at home, and you felt a lot of positivity and just people coming together for a common cause, right? And so that, I think, was good for us. And I know the communication we got from the current student athletes that are on campus, who are ultimately the ones that are dealing with this the hardest, because they're there day to day and have to face the AD and all these folks. It was, their communication to us was, we were really down and thought this was it. There was nothing we can do. And just being here tonight and meeting all of you just gives us so much hope and feels like we have so much support out there. So that was really cool to see as well.
And Russell, I know you've been communicating with some of those current athletes at Clemson. What have you discussed? Is there any plan set in motion, and what are the athletes feeling right now?
Yeah, so I cannot speak to exactly how the athletes are feeling because I don't want to put my I can't speak for them and their experience. I imagine they're experiencing a range of emotions, from anger to grief to rage to passion, to a wide range of emotions. I have been in contact with them. I've been in contact with two students in particular. They were asking for direction, and I basically suggested that, hey, get on a Zoom. I'll help you set it up. So it's great. The communities are helping each other. One of the William & Mary alumni who I've been working with, she works at Zoom, so she gave us a Zoom room, and I gave him the information so that he can set up the Zoom for last night. And I said, hey, get everyone on a Zoom, and it's not going to be it may not be very productive, but you need everyone together to vent and to kind of connect. And that's like the first step. And like, once you do that, develop a core 5 and then get back to me, and then we'll move forward. So we're still in the beginning stages. I can't let too much out the bag, because I don't want someone from the university to kind of catch on to what we're doing, because we're going to come with the fire. But we are, but we're planning, and so that's really good. And unfortunately, I have seen this kind of play out a few times. So now I do have a little bit of a roadmap that we developed, and so we have a toolkit. So I'm going to be giving that to the core organizers. It's a video, and then also some materials on how to just develop strategy, and then also how to organize themselves. So I'm working with them on that. But one thing that I do want to say, and I want everyone, if they don't listen to anything else, I want all the track community to listen to this. I did not go to Brown University. I didn't go to any of these universities. I went to Princeton. But the reason why it was so important for me to get involved with Brown, and then subsequently these other schools, is because I especially with Brown, I saw that this was going to be a trend if we don't stop it. And it seems as though a lot of times people, are just upset, but they feel like there's nothing that they can do. And a lot of times with these university fights, it's the alumni and the students who are associated with that university fighting, and they ultimately have, won or in part have won. But with Clemson going down, I want this to be very clear. No one's program is safe. And so if you think your program is safe, you are wrong. We need to save Clemson, because if this goes down and it doesn't reverse, it's going to set off a tidal wave. And I'm not being alarmist. I'm just telling you how it is. And so when we are, putting out ways for other people to get involved, please get involved, because you, by helping save Clemson, will be helping to save your program. A program that you care about, whether you're a student there, whether you're a parent, whether you are an alumni, an alumnus or an alumni, you need to be involved in this fight, because if a major Power 5 school goes down, that's going to set the groundwork for these things to tumble. And if people think that, oh, well, the men's teams are getting cut, the women's teams are safe, that's also not true, because at the University of Minnesota, we have it on record that the AD and the AAD, their plan is to try to get down to the NCAA minimum of teams that they can support. So when they cut the men's team, that was going to cut too many men's opportunities. So then they were going to have to cut women's opportunities. And which women's opportunity were they going to cut? They were going to cut from the women's cross country roster. So women's opportunities are in jeopardy as well when track and field goes down, because if they cut track, they're going to overshoot their number, and then they're going to have to cut women's opportunity to rebalance it. So this is a problem, and it's coming, and it's going to affect a lot more schools than people realize. So we need to come together and make sure that this doesn't happen, and send a really strong, clear message that this cannot stand.
Russell, how did you become the guy for this? As you mentioned, you didn't go to any of these schools. How did you become the go-to person here? Because I'll admit, when that first announcement of, I don't even remember which program was the first one, and they used COVID as the pretext to cut it, I thought, man, it's one of the hardest things in the world to do, to convince a university bureaucracy to change their mind, and yet you've been successful. So how did you find your way into this role?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think it's just a kind of a, providence plus, being in the right place at the right time plus passion. So I heard about what's happening with Brown University. That was the first one. And Brown University announced that they were cutting their track and field program. And they announced that it wasn't a financial decision. It was a decision for Title IX reasons, and to increase competitiveness across their sporting offerings. Mm-hmm. But then they also noted that they did it to increase diversity across their varsity and club team offerings, because what they were doing is reducing, or they were moving track and field down from varsity status to club status. So by doing that, you will inherently make the club team offerings more diverse. But, people who don't know about college athletics don't know that club and varsity are not the same. Club does not get institutional funding in the same way. They are not supported by the athletic department, and they do not get recruiting spots. And they were elevating sailing in its place. And so that happened. And then 2 days later, the George Floyd murder occurred. And everyone and everywhere was releasing their statements. And Brown University released a statement saying that they were committed to looking at their institutional practices, and committed to racial, equality, and looking at how they have contributed to, all this other stuff. And I was like, that is flying in the face of what they're actually doing. They literally just cut one of their most diverse teams, and a team with the second most Black athlete participation, and are going to replace it with sailing, a team that has no diversity. So it's just like, I was like, this is out of control. So I contacted the Brown University alumni who were organizing everything, and said, hey, we need to get this story out. This needs to be a story that needs to be communicated out to people. And they said, yeah, we're working on some op-eds and things like that. And I said, okay, cool. But then I decided to take it upon myself and write something to Medium. So I spent all day Did some research, got some numbers together. I went to a school where that's all we had to do. So, I'm kind of used to doing that, and I did some research and, put some things together, and I posted to Medium. I am not a well-known person. Well, at least I wasn't then. Don't really have a big platform. So I didn't expect the article to be the catalyst for change. I wrote the article to get the ideas down. And my thought was, okay, after I write the article, maybe we can show publications, hey, this is a story that you should cover. Went to sleep, woke up the next morning, and I had thousands of views, and it just kept snowballing and snowballing. And it really caught on and kind of went viral, which was pretty cool. And within a week of me posting my article, they reversed the decision. And so it wasn't solely, the article, but the article helped to bring a lot of attention to the issue. And that matched with the organized effort from Brown, their internal pressure, then also some of their donor outreach. Those things combined, I believe, helped to bring the decision to the fore. And then also, universities, especially at that time, they don't want to get embarrassed, and they do not want to answer tough questions. And if you're asking, hey, why are you cutting a team that has 11 black guys on it and replacing it with a team that has no black guys on it, and the team that you cut has more black athletes than your crew, soccer, lacrosse, and baseball teams combined, it's hard to defend that because it's indefensible. And so that is how I kind of got involved in that. So to answer your question, I kind of just organically fell into it. And then when University of Minnesota went down and William and Mary, I was reluctant to get involved, to be honest, because I was like, I don't know how I can help save these other schools when they have financial issues. It's not the same argument, but I decided to just jump in, go forward. And I had the Brown organizers meet with the University of Minnesota and William and Mary organizers, and we worked on strategy together. And I've been checking in with both schools along the way, and kind of the rest is kind of unfolded like that. Yeah.
Ryan, going back to what Russell said previously, he talked about how this could set off a tidal wave if Clemson's decision stands. Do you get a sense of that amongst the fellow alums on the program, of just the stakes in this decision and how it's not just about Clemson, but what it says about all of track and cross at the NCAA D1 level?
Yeah, I'm actually in our Zoom meeting. I said almost exactly what Russell said. I said, you know what, guys, we are all here are passionate about Clemson and the track and field program, and we have a responsibility to do what we can to see if we can turn this thing around. But we also have a responsibility for all the other programs out here, because it is a huge statement if the number one football school in the country right now and the first Power 5 school out there to cut a full men's track and cross country program is doing it. If it's easy for Clemson to do it, it's going to be a lot easier for a lot of other schools to do it. And so it is a really, really, it's a really meaningful situation that hopefully we can have some influence in. Again, this is 24 hours fresh, and who knows what that road will look like, but there's more at stake here. And I think there's a lot more at play than a lot of people realize, a lot of us on this podcast realize. And Russell, I'm sure you've seen this in dealing with these other universities, just all the discussions that arise when something like this happens, and the what ifs and all, and what could be, from the talk and the rumors of, hey, after this year, university presidents and people that are high up making decisions, they may really look to reduce those minimum numbers of programs, right? We're at 16 right now. After COVID, it's a really, really easy platform to really push for, hey, we're being held to this number of 16 or whatever it is. Financially, that's irresponsible given all the hits our university has taken. We need to reduce that even more. And if those kind of things and conversations happen, then this is even a kind of a bigger, unleash of water or flooding of the gates or whatever you want to say. And track and field is going to be one of those programs that go.
My thought is the only convenient thing about how these programs have been going is there's kind of been it's been a steady build here. It's like one program a month almost. Maybe it hasn't been quite that consistent. But what happens, I guess my question's to Russell, what happens when the levee breaks and we're seeing 3 programs a week and Russell, you yourself and other people don't have the resources. There's just too many to get a coalition of people together. I mean, is there bigger things that the track community can do to prevent this from happening? I mean, do we need to say, hey, maybe we should stop asking for so many spots on a track team? Does the NCAA need to cut indoor track to save at least outdoor track? Like, what is a possible solution to where when these start getting cut in mass, that I don't know, the whole sport isn't eliminated, like you said?
That's a large question.
Yeah.
I don't have the full answer to that. If I did, I think I would have a lot more people coming to me with looking for the answers. What I will say is that we should really work to try to prevent that as much as possible. 3 programs per week is kind of a Armageddon kind of situation, and we need to avoid that as much as possible. When University of Minnesota went down, that was really the opportunity where we should have all rallied. We didn't in the way that we should have. Clemson is now like, okay, this is the last wake up call, guys. If we don't do it now, it's going to get to that point and we're going to get overwhelmed. And so we need to do it now. We need to make sure that this program doesn't go down and that the arguments for why this program needs to be saved are really, really clearly communicated out to the public in a way that makes it really clear. Now, the good thing is that now that the election season is over, there may actually be a bit more of an appetite for these publications to cover the story. I'll just be honest. When I was trying to get my op-ed that I published in Star Tribune, I shopped it to a bunch of different outlets, and essentially, they wanted to cover all of the current events that were happening, which understandably so. But now there might be more space for this kind of conversation, which I feel like is really needed. So we need to make sure that this is a story that is out there, that is clearly communicated, and so that it is really clear, not only to an AD who is really keyed in, but to all ADs that this don't touch track and field. We need to advocate for ourselves in a way of, from a position of strength, not a position of, I don't want to say weakness, but we have the right arguments. We know what this sport does. We know that it is a sport that offers great opportunities to students, no matter their background. It's frankly, it's probably the sport that offers the most efficient and effective opportunity for a higher education for female athletes. I mean, what other sport provides 80 or so opportunities for female athletes, in the way that track and field does? There's no other sport that's as large, on the women's side. And so you have this sport that is really egalitarian, that is really diverse, that's really accessible from a social economic standpoint, and we're letting it kind of go to the wayside, and we can't do that. We have to ensure that the sport stays, that the sport maintains a strong position, and so that's going to require a lot of collaboration between coaches. Maybe the Coaches Association. It's going to require athletes. One of the best things for William and Mary, their women's team actually released a statement that they were boycotting, or they were striking rather. And so, and it wasn't the whole team, but I think it was about 2/3 of the team or something of that nature. They said, we're not playing and we're not competing until our men's team is brought back. And so it's going to require things like that, things that are frankly, uncomfortable for people to do, but we have to make a strong position. Because here's the thing, I looked at the University of Minnesota's numbers. A lot of schools are probably similar. Why is it that for fiduciary reasons, track and field, cross country, and indoor track gets combined into one, but for Title IX reasons, they separate it into 3 different opportunities. And then for sports counting numbers, they count it as 6 different sports, but they only pay one coach, to coach those 6 different sports, but it's 120 opportunities. I mean, track and field coaches are getting paid the same amount of money as a baseball coach or a basketball coach or what have you. Those are one season sports. Track and field coaches have to coach 3 different sports. Sometimes they're getting less money than some of these other. Well, of course, they're getting less money than basketball coaches at big schools, but even at mid majors and smaller schools, track and field coaches aren't paid in a way that's commensurate with the amount of work they're putting out. And so it's okay if it's 3 different sports, then we should have 3 different sporting staffs. We should have, we should have the amount of coaches that map onto 3 different sports. Why do we only have, what is it? I think it's 6 coaches, like 3 paid and 3 volunteer per gender, like, for 120 sporting opportunities. That doesn't make any sense. And so we need to strongly advocate for our position. Is okay, if you're going to say that we're one sport, then you need to then just say the athletes count just one time. If you can't do that, if the athletes need to count 2.5 times, then we need 2.5 times the resources. And those arguments again are uncomfortable, but I feel like track and field, we have for too long acted as if we are afraid to really stand firmly and advocate from a position of of strength and position of just being really secure in what we want. And we need to start doing that. We need to start advocating. But before we get to the coaches and before we get to kind of numbers with NCAA, we need to make sure that we save Clemson. And then there needs to be a larger conversation in terms of what needs to be done in order to save the sport moving forward. And I think that's going to require, a really hard look at how women's track is used to counter football. That probably is going to need to be discussed in a big way, because if we can really figure out a way that these athletes are counted fewer times, maybe you combine indoor track and outdoor track and make that one track season, get rid of the NCAA indoor championship. And, I loved the indoor championship. I ran at the indoor championship. It was a lot of fun, but, if they got to get rid of it, they got to get rid of it, and so that might need to be something that needs to be seriously considered. I also think that track coaches need to seriously think about how they can do quad meets and tri meets. And, I know a lot of post-collegiate athletes will get upset about this, but, the invitationals, I don't think really help the sport, in the college level in a strong way. And so if you're able to do quad meets and tri meets, that can bring some value, a cultural value, because a lot of the non-revenues, they're not making money, but people are still coming to the games. They're still coming to the baseball games. They're still coming. There's a community connection. And we don't necessarily have those community connections all the time at the big invitationals. And so that's another thing that I would suggest that the coaches really think about. So, there's a few different strategy points in terms of the larger organizational front. But in terms of what needs to be done in the immediate term, we just need to save Clemson, and then we can figure out, step B and C and D afterwards.
Well, I appreciate your response to a very broad, admittedly a very broad question, and I think your input is valuable because no one has looked as hard at this issue probably as you have. Before we go, Ryan, any last minute things on your mind? Just seeing your program at stake.
No, I mean, I think one of the things that Russell said that stood out is just that, there's going to be a need to be collaboration. And I think just in the last 24 hours of this happening, that's what is happening. And it's been, I guess, comforting maybe is a word to see all the outreach. I mean, from just me as one person, the amount of people that reached out to me, from people at the Coaches Association to at the NCAA, from the shoe companies, from other schools that have gone through this, alumni obviously, and all these folks that are offering just a simple sorry that you're going through this, to others that are saying, hey, if you need help, let me know, and then others saying, here's some things that we saw with these other programs that went through it, right? And a number of people actually referred us to Russell. I think multiple people that we've all spoke with kind of pointed us to Russell, and so that's another great resource. I think at this point, this is my thought, is any insight and any knowledge we can gain from the folks that have gone through this already, the better we are. It definitely, I definitely couldn't imagine feeling what it would have been like to be a Brown and being the first to deal with this year. And so just with all the outreach, it felt like, all right, there might be some kind of path to help guide, because when you have hundreds of alumni that all of a sudden get hit with this, there's a lot of questions. And so there's at least some roadmap that some folks have taken, which is super helpful. So, I think that's really it. So I think now the plan is to get organized and figure out the next steps. So,
yeah. And to that front, I noticed a petition on change.org has been started. There's been about 18,000 signatures on that. I know some people are donating money as well. Hopefully these type of things can lead the AD to reconsider his statement about the decision being final. But with that, we'll leave it there. For my co-host, Kevin, Russell, and Ryan, thanks for being here, guys. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.